Hi everyone, welcome to yet another episode, a new week, and we are excited to be back. I know this episode has been a long time coming. Everybody has asked about it. We've been very excited, getting lots of questions because I finally have the expert. She's finally here to join us to answer all the questions. We've had lots of different opinions and experiences from the moms we've had before, and now we want to tie everything in and actually learn what are we supposed to know when it comes to comprehensive sexuality education. Debunk all the myths and educate as much as we can. Like we keep saying on this podcast, it's all about holding space for sensitive conversations so that we can start to change the narrative when it comes to sexual and reproductive health. So, my guest today is a fantastic expert on the subject, and I will allow her to introduce herself and what she does.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
My name is Akinyi Ochieng. I call myself a family sex educator because my intention is to empower family to have sex-positive conversations in their homes. And I've been doing this work now for over half a decade.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
You come very highly recommended to me by a mom because she had an interaction with you during a parenting class in the school, her children's school. And I think the way the feedback was given was so empowering and encouraging, especially because, again, this is an area where you feel like very few people are standing up as champions and as warriors trying to push for appropriate education. So I'm very excited to have you on and for the conversation that we're going to have.
I'm also excited to be here.
Excellent.
It's interesting talking about what people fear talking about. Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
So what drove you towards wanting to educate people on sex, on reproduction, on their bodies? What was the driving force?
So I tell people I started sex education while in primary school.
Okay.
An interesting history is I had a dad, 9 girls. So I had a dad who talked to us a lot about sex education. He may never have gone into deeper details, but he really tried. Considering that age, if he was alive today, he would have been 90 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
His peers rarely mention the word sex to their children.
Yeah.
And so he spoke to us about a lot about growing up, relationships, things around puberty, challenging exposure to boys, all those kinds of things. And my dad died when I was just entering puberty.
Right, okay.
So
he started when you were really young.
He started the relationship conversation way early.
Oh, fantastic.
Before even we hit puberty.
Yeah.
So by the time he died, I survived puberty, young adult life. Even now in marriage, I still use the information that my dad taught me way before I joined puberty.
Isn't that a blessing?
It is a blessing, yes.
Yeah, and like you said, it's very rare, especially for
Very
men
rare.
to take up the mantle.
And especially men of his age, because that is an age where speaking to the opposite gender was really seen as a taboo. And so just him coming into that space was very special for us.
Right.
Now, what that transition was into, I went into primary school where I joined Straight Talk Club, where we used to talk and educate our peers a lot around sexual health, because I saw people struggling, but at least I had that particular basics at home. And then into high school, into campus, the same. Now, when I finished campus, I used to volunteer a lot at the community level, speaking with teenagers.
Okay.
So what drove me to now focus primarily on the family is that I saw the gap. The teenagers yearn for information. So you'll find camps are organized. People talk to them about sex, puberty, growth.
Yeah.
Those camps are like 2 to 3 days. But then what happens after the 2 to 3 days? They're left hanging. They're literally left to go back to the sources of information where we didn't want them to go in the first place.
True. Because sometimes you leave them with more questions than answers from a session like that.
Yes. So they have more questions. They now know that we can actually seek for this information, but what is the source? What is a credible source?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the world of the social media or the internet or the world web as we know it has an overexplosion of both right information and wrong information.
True.
So when we leave them into that, then who is the credible source of their information?
That's true.
Or sometimes you find that they now turn into their peers who may be equally uninformed. So it's an informed peer to an informed peer teaching each other about sexuality information, and then they base it into wrong narratives.
Yeah.
So for me, the start of this was literally to try to empower parents so that we can create the safe spaces so that our children can be better empowered. I usually tell this, Doctor, is that I tell parents to imagine this. Imagine if the Minister for Education told us parents today that they were going to teach the syllabus for maths, let's say from grade kindergarten to grade 12 within 3 days, certain exams. Will parents agree?
Of course not.
But that is what we do to our children when we take them to those 2-3 days of conversations and then say, my child has had sex education.
Yeah.
That is practically what we do to those children.
That's
so
true.
if we are empowered, then we are able to then have better conversations at home.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
But I can imagine, given that you know how the space is, you must have met pushback almost immediately. You must have been challenged on the decision to educate and empower. What was that like, and how did you navigate that?
The challenges come in maybe 2 to 3 different narratives. So for one is really a parent who is yearning to open that space, but they're struggling with their own discomfort.
Right.
They're struggling with their own shame. We don't call it shame, but it really is shame. But that's what it is. It is shame. When we say it's awkward, when we say it's embarrassing, it's really a shame story.
That's true.
That we hold, that's still holding us back. So that parent is yearning, but they're in that space. You also have another parent who maybe is stepping out of the shame fold, but they still don't know what to say. They don't know how to say it. Yeah. They don't know anything because really nobody talked to them about it.
True.
And then you have the other parent who may have been in this, currently we have the mixture of parents. We even have the millennial parents, we have it's a mixture of parents. So you have some who grew up in the world of the internet. So they're also really struggling to balance between what's right, what's wrong.
Yeah.
In their own world.
Yeah.
Which
is unique to them.
What is unique to them.
Because for us,
Yes.
Millennials. Yes. We sort of arrived when the internet was starting.
Yes.
So it was really not really accessible until much later in life.
Yes.
For them, they're arriving smack in the center of...
So it's that balance of what's the boundaries? What's right, what's wrong? What's moral, what's not moral? How do I define this world for my own child? So that is from the parent's perspective. Then, of course, you have the other perspective of people who think you are doing a white man's job. So you have an agenda to promote something that is seen as the white man's.
It's Western, it's foreign.
It's Western, it's foreign. You're going against religion. You're going against all these things. But I've generally found out that if you have deeper conversation, which is not from an angle of fight, you even find that some of those religious people open up. Because I've literally had sessions in church.
Okay.
I've had sessions where it's in schools run by
churches.
So sometimes it's what do people understand what this is.
True.
And it's also about finding that balance, because I say sex education is a global issue, but it's navigated by the local nuances.
That's very true.
So what are our local nuances? What works for us as a society? How do we define and make boundaries or contextualize it within our own local
setup. Because even if you want to educate, you have to be respectful and mindful of cultural backgrounds, moral standings, religious backgrounds. We have so many different communities, so many tribes, so many in fact multicultural. That's how Kenya is set up. And so if we're not respectful of that, that's the first place where we fail, because then people, like you said, will assume it's a foreign agenda and assume that you are trying to teach what, for sure, you're not trying to push. There's no agenda you're trying to push. But then as you're navigating that space, because we have lots of parents listening in or watching, what advice would you want? Just before we even start talking about the details of comprehensive sexuality education, where would you want their mindset to be as we start this conversation?
I think for me, I start from... Any parent who's watching this is always start from a point of compassion for yourself, because we carry a lot of shame story. That's the truth.
That's the truth, yeah.
And it's if I say sex education is the work of the parent more than the work of the child, because you need to grow and learn into it so that then you're able to impact your own child.
Yeah.
So it's literally telling yourself, I may never have had this. It may have been different for my generation, because there's also generational differences.
Yeah.
And our perspective across the generations are totally different.
That's true. That's
so we
also
have to bring ourselves into that space where we say we are willing to move on to a path that is better for our children. I also want every parent who is watching this to ask themselves, what is the cost of our silence? What is the cost of not speaking about it? What is that cost for that child? When I don't speak about it, what's the cost for that child? Because when we start counting our costs, then we see that the cost of silence is basically more than our shame story. And it will even help us break that shame story. So that's particularly where I started from.
Okay.
The other, as I said, when I say that sex education is a global issue, is also to remember that it's about your own context. So it doesn't matter how the globe narrative is, but as a parent, how do I bring it? So that I'm still factual, but I've still brought in my own context and perspective into the story around sexuality education. So let us not be scared that maybe the world is saying something that I don't agree with. We literally still have the option of saying, you know what, this is the fact, but my perspective is a bit different because I see it from this different angle. And so you bring in sex education with a lot of empathy, with a lot of love and respect around it, and without making your children like fear it. We should also live in an age where we're not trying to make children that sex is bad, because that's what we were taught. Like,
that's
sex
exactly
is bad.
what we're taught.
You're saying bad manners when you say your breast, your vagina, your vulva. I'm sorry to say this. I don't know if you get it, but really,
here we speak factually.
Yes, it's the body parts are not bad words, and that's where the shame starts from. Like, don't say penis, don't say vagina, don't say vulva. Like, you literally be beaten for calling your body parts.
Okay.
Because unfortunately, we sexualized everything. These body parts have other functions that are not necessarily sexual.
True.
So it's come with a lot of compassion, come with a lot of openness. Because if you're also not open, then you miss out the perspective of your children.
Agreed.
It's not a lecture.
Yeah.
It's talk. It's conversation.
Yeah.
It's what we are doing here.
Yeah.
You're talking and they're talking.
True.
It's not talking down to. Because this is also the other myth around sex education. It's just beyond giving information. The main thing is also to impact our children with skills to make decisions around what they know. True. Because knowledge not used is the same as ignorance.
True. Very
so
true.
It doesn't matter how much I know about a subject. If I'm not able to apply it, it doesn't help me.
Yeah.
So it's also us pausing and allowing our children to reflect. And the only way they can reflect is if we allow our children to bring their world to us.
True.
So it's not just about our experiences. It's also more of our children's experiences
as well
to the story of sex education.
That's very true.
Yeah.
So now we come to the meat of the matter. What exactly is comprehensive sexuality education, or also known as sex education? How would you define it?
Okay. So I will define it as anything that impacts a sexual being to be a healthy sexual being. So when we look at the human being as a sexual being, what really happens is there's the mind, the body, the environment around it. So it's looking at everything that will help you as a sexual being then to be a healthy sexual being. So this starts from basically the mind, which is your own mind, how you look at yourself, that is identity, the values you bring on board, because also that affects how you relate and everything around you. It's also looking at it in terms of your emotions, how you handle and manage your emotions. It then translates to then you physically developing as that sexual being. So the human development and that is usually more, we talk about the puberty, the growth, everything around you sexually as a human being. Then of course then it surrounds then to your relationships around you. So that's the context around you. So those are the friendships. Relationships starts basically from family, friendships, in future they transition into romantic relationships. And then it's also about now other decisions that you make now around you as sexual beings. So that is the sexual decision making. So issues now around then the subject of sex itself, then the subjects of other things like contraceptives, yes, that come along as you go.
Yeah.
There's also the element of safety, because safety affects us as we grow. So there's the sexual abuse conversation, the sexual safety around it. Yes, so that in a whole nutshell is really what sexual education is.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, most of us just think of sex education as sex.
As sex, the act.
Intercourse sex.
Yeah.
But it really is a lot of things that affects our decision, even into how we make choices around intercourse, that makes sex education. Because there's human beings, as we think both logically and emotionally. So it's not just logical thinking.
Yeah.
And that is why we base it around all these factors. And our environment of even how we see love, how we see healthy relationship around us, how we see boundaries, how we see respect being modeled around us. All this impacts how we make choices of relationship, how we make choices of everything else around us. So that is why sex education is a bigger conversation beyond just sex.
Right.
Yeah.
And I like that you've mentioned all the different aspects, because it covers the mentality around it, the physicality of it, there's the emotion side of it, and the development of all of these to create a complete human being who then understands themselves in fullness and is confident enough so that as we interact with each other, I'm able to respect myself and respect you during that interaction, and understand what is correct and what is not, what is acceptable and what is not, and how it varies from person to person.
Yes.
Because a big part of sex education is respect, and like you said, making sure you're instilled with values that also help guide you, because it's a moral topic as well. When we are covering the topic, because this is the limitation as a doctor, us guys are very scientific. And one of the things that this podcast hopes to demystify and help smooth and transition between doctors and patients is the fact that we tend to approach things very scientifically, and we forget that there's the emotional side, there's the psychological side as well. So even as I'm talking to young people who are coming to the office to discuss issues around their changes during puberty, any issues that are rising with those, asking questions about sex, sexuality, and all of that, and also parents, because they do come to doctors for guidance. It's just also opening the mind up for us, the colleagues that will be watching or listening in, that it's not just as simple as discussing biology. It's not just as simple as the physiology of the way the body functions. It's actually much more, and to a point where you need to listen to your patient and understand where they are coming from, so that you're able to contextualize from their culture, their moral standing, their values. So I really like that. You've mentioned how holistic it is. When it comes to the conversations, when would you say would be the ideal time, or is a correct time to be addressing issues to do with reproduction and sexuality?
Okay. So when we look at what we've defined sex to be holistically, it therefore means that the conversation starts right when our children are born. Because look at it like the functions of love, the function of respect. Children learn those without even us speaking.
True.
So they're modeled.
True, yeah.
Boundaries, they're modeled. Even consent, where our society only think of consent as sexual.
True.
Consent modeling starts way before
younger.
it's sexual.
Yeah.
So these are things that children learn as they grow. It's modeling them. So the conversation around sexuality itself is both spoken and unspoken. But the reason why we also empower parents is so that whatever we do is very intentional. So that then we create an intentional environment where our children learn, even the one that are being modeled, we are able to see that they learn them positively. Now, when you come back to now basically talking about sex conversation, the basic of, for example, naming body parts starts when children are very young. When you're washing them, when you're changing them, that is the time where a parent can literally start saying, this is called this, instead of, I know we give them all the names.
All the nicknames possible.
What? No, even now there's Roscoco, I don't know, all the range of names.
I'm still learning, clearly.
Yes.
Right.
But it's basically empowering, because when we start, that is where sexual shame starts from.
True.
The naming of the body parts.
True.
And the reason why it's for us, it's not just about sex education, it's also about safety.
Yeah.
We've seen scenarios where children are molested, but they can't even explain how they were molested.
Exactly.
Or they were molested because they even didn't know the function of that body part.
Yeah.
I'll share a sad story where a grandfather molested the two children and was telling them, making them do oral sex to him, but telling them this is like mommy's breast.
Okay, that's so disturbing.
Yes, these are and they are real, because these cases occur where the young children still don't understand, so they don't even understand the difference between the breast and the penis, because
again, you've not named anything, and you've not told them,
and you've said
boundaries.
tabia mbaya, so they don't even know what is happening. And it's so this is also beyond just sex, it's also creating safety for the children. They can literally speak, and the more they speak, the people are even scared, because they know these children are very informed. They're vocal,
so you
and
actually
stay
away from that child.
So that is where we start from. And then we progress to around, now Conversations for Children is now around, of course, boundaries and safety, because we find children are also very curious. So this is the phase where your child follows you everywhere, like you are stuck on each other's skin. They'll want to see why your body parts are all different from my own body parts. So it's literally the time for parents to literally start even normalizing that we are different beings and we have different body parts.
True.
It's also normalizing that part of we need to have privacy. So it's starting to introduce privacy, and then children introduce privacy. This is a stage where children also play the chababa, you know, where you find them even opening other people's skirt, all doctors. They really, like, they want to look at
you want to see the body parts, and you learn basically so it's also exploration. So it's also, because it's curiosity. And it's innocent. That's the thing we forget as adults. You're looking at it as an adult mind with everything you know.
Exactly.
This child is innocent and learning from exploration.
That is their point of development. So it's just reaffirming and telling them that, bringing in the concept of privacy, bringing in the concept of boundaries as they go through. So that is early adult life. It's basically around values. It's basically around boundaries, respect. Those are the key lessons that children learn. Even consent. Practicing asking permission in some of the basic things, so that your child picks up from them.
That's true.
Then as you transition now into middle childhood, where this child is around from 8 years of age, 7 years, I can say from 7 years of age, you now start introducing topic of growth and development. Because this is also the sad part, is parents unfortunately do wait for children to start menstruation. Then we start the puberty
now the
talk.
Conversation after the fact.
Yes.
And already there's a trauma that's been instilled, because...
And as a doctor, you know that menses are the last reproductive change for a girl. So it basically means this girl has started puberty long time ago.
So you're doing a post-dated
conversation for puberty. But we need to do predated, because the children need to grow into puberty knowing this is what is happening. This is what to expect.
This is normal.
This is normal. But now, unfortunately, we do post-dated puberty conversations. And then you find for boys, unfortunately, because most of their signs are internal, so you will not see them. You will not know when they have erection, the erection started, when the wet dream started. So they will just slide in and walk out of the other with all the trauma and the shock and everything.
The lack of information. It's actually more dangerous than actually telling them what to expect.
Exactly. So they're walking out of that phase not knowing anything that happened. So this is basically a period for us to start the conversation. And I want to emphasize this. Let's not wait for, as we said, the post-dated. Growth conversation can start early, because it's not one talk. Puberty takes 4 to 6 years. So as a parent, imagine you have the time of introducing these topics in bits, layering them on. So basically talking about people will grow up. That's a very basic conversation. Even a 5-year-old can have
take
that.
In that information.
Then as you layer it on, you speak about now the changes of the bodies. You speak about all these things will happen. You speak about things around menstruation. Let us also normalize talking to boys about wet dreams and erections and all. They need to learn from us as parents as they grow up. Then, of course, you get to the next phase, which is now as you've factored in the puberty and growth. This is also the thing. Stop telling your child about sex when they don't understand what reproduction is. Because then how do you add those two? Sex conversation, we teach it basically because if they've understood what reproduction is, they now know
where do babies come from.
They've
had that
their process.
Understanding.
Now start talking about sexual decision making. And the discussion around sex is also not telling your children don't get pregnant. I say that is not sex education. That's a rule.
That's a rule to be broken. it's a challenge.
We need to have conversations
Unfortunately, yeah.
around sexual decision making, not don't get pregnant. And really here it's empowering that child to critically think that even before I make that choice, when I'm making that choice, what does it mean for me? Let us also talk about consequences in a way that is not fear-based, but in a way that allows the children to understand, yes, there are consequences, and how does that impact how I think about things? How does it impact about me thinking about even dating in future? Not necessarily that you're saying when you talk about it, you're giving them the permission to do dating now.
True.
Your child, as they progress into teenage life, it's also talking around things around consent. What does legal consent mean? Because we even have children who are in prison for having sex with other teenagers.
True.
So they also need to understand that legally, the law says, if you're doing sex
age of consent
below 18 years, you're doing it at your own risk.
Yeah.
So because it also helps them, and just speaking about consent itself, so that then they also not taken advantage of. True. Teaching about consent is also not just about them making it. It's also about protecting them from people who may be taking advantage of them.
True.
So that is basically that process of the conversations.
True.
I also tell parents, and this is where it's a big debate, when do I talk about contraceptives, when do I not talk about contraceptives, is also trying to see if, sometimes I can see my child is literally going this path, and I need to help them. I can basically have this conversation.
Yeah.
But because also talking around conversations around sexual decision making means I may talk about even that condom itself, even abstinence is still part of sexual decision making.
Yeah.
So there's abstinence, which of course we promote because it's the surest way of protection, both pregnancy and
sexually
STIs.
transmitted infections. Yeah.
But then there are children who are having sex. What conversation do we still have with them?
Yeah.
It's also speaking about condom as the other alternative for them. It's also speaking around contraceptives, which is a big debate. I know it's a big debate, but it's, as a parent, because now this is family-focused education, is trying to see how you balance those kind of conversation as you go into that conversations.
Yeah.
Because children, you're not teaching your child for today, you're also teaching your child for tomorrow. So your 17-year-old is soon going to be 18, 19. They're going to walk into campus. How informed are they?
True.
When those gates open.
How confident are you that they'll be making the right decisions? Yeah.
Yes.
So that's such a key point that we tend to miss out on, is the fact that you're teaching your child based off of your own morals and values without leaving room for their autonomy, which is coming.
Yes.
They're going to become an independent person with an independent brain, thinking and making decisions. And if you don't arm them and you don't prepare them, then the pregnancy you're threatening about is going to happen.
Yeah.
Or even worse, the STIs, some of them that we know are not even curable, is going to happen. And so even like I can think back and think to the conversations we used to have when we were younger, and the threat was you'll get pregnant. If you talk to, in fact, that's how I was told. If you talk to boys, you'll get pregnant, which is problematic in so many ways, because instead of socializing and teaching us how to socialize with each other, we segregate girls on one side and boys on the other side and say, now we are protecting them. Instead of teaching them that it's normal, we are going to interact as adults, let's learn how to interact and what is right, what is wrong, what boundaries are, what consent is. Yeah. So it's such a powerful message that, like you've said, it's layered conversation. You're not going to sit one day and say, let's have the talk.
No.
Because I think that's the biggest mistake we have.
It's a million-minute conversation. In fact, it's when you break it down in such a way that you have small little bits,
exactly, and to the capacity of their understanding.
To small bits, and it's repetition. It's because children learn by repetition.
True.
So I'll tell you, for example, my child who is 8, I continuously speak about body boundaries, and it's like sometimes I'm like, did I just speak about this?
Yeah.
So they learn through repetition.
True.
It's also allowing children to bring their own world. So how do they see it from their own point of view? So it's not just you talking.
True.
It's a conversation. So how is, for example, teenage pregnancy, how does it reflect on them? What do they know? What do they understand? Even when we come back to issues now that are happening around the issues which we are all scared and running out of scared at the LGBTQ conversation. How are they seeing it from their own world? Because they see that these things are literally from every movie that children see,
Yeah.
every animation, it's there.
Yeah.
How are they seeing it from their own world? What does that mean?
What does it mean to them? What are they understanding?
What are they understanding?
Yeah.
When you even look at concepts, maybe some of them have even seen such people being like, how do they understand it from? So you have to bring their world into that conversation so that then as a parent, you're able to help them. But when you just talk down upon them,
Yeah.
they'll hide their world.
Yeah. True.
So we need to create safe spaces where children can open their world to us and bring it to them, even as we give them facts and our own experiences. They also bring theirs, and we balance the two so that they also understand the world in a better way.
The realities around us.
Yeah.
I bring in a little bit of a curveball. So now, me, I'm a parent. And I want to talk to my children, but me, nobody talked to me. Nobody explained anything to do with my body. I found out everything as a rude shock as it arrived. So now I'm a parent and I'm scared. Like you said, there's shame around it. I can barely name my own body parts. Everything I've talked to my child so far has been bad manners. Here, bad manners. Turn off the TV. Change the program. It's an instinctual response, especially if you don't know any better. So we're not faulting you, but you just don't know any better. Where do I start? Are there resources? Should I reach out to someone? Where do I start? That's the question that I've been asked.
Okay. So where do you start is, as I said, is basically from yourself, reflecting on how do you want it to be. So first reflect on how do you want the conversations to look like. You may never have had it. Picture how you'd want it as a parent. How different would you have? How different do you want it now?
Now, yeah.
So picture that change because that is then your biggest starting point. How I want it is very different. Now, when it comes to resources, unfortunately, we are limited in the market in kind of the like books and resources that we have because most of them are again westernized. So it means even the context as a parent, you have to contextualize them before you even use them for information. But we also have a few podcasts that speaks around conversations around puberty, also Western. You need to also look through as a parent to understand so that you then know how to educate your child.
True.
But we also have in the market trainers, educators who even help parents have such conversations around it.
Yeah.
And it's so parent can seek such support just to know how they want to navigate it. Also, as a parent is, as I've said, when you picture that change that you want, then it's basically easier for you to even research information and say, I want it different. So this is what I can look for. These are the sites maybe I can go for. And when you go for resources, is try to look at resources that are medically proven. Like there's a medical backing to it because there's also a lot of people giving perspectives online.
True.
Which may not be factual.
That's true.
So try to look for resources that have medical background backing to it.
Yeah.
They're more trustworthy. You know that what they give is more factual than people giving their opinion or facts. Yes.
Okay, I like that. And then in terms of like on our side as gynecologists, we also encourage parents to come in with their children.
Yeah.
If you find it's just too difficult to have this conversation, come in and speak to a medical practitioner or somebody who is known to be a trainer so that you can have a conversation to arm yourself, to educate yourself. Because the reality is you have to teach yourself first.
Yes.
Because that's the context that we are in. Comprehensive education is not just targeting children. We're actually targeting ourselves because it's a gap for us. It was a gap for us during our development. So we have to catch up. We play catch up first, and then now I'm able to know how exactly will I approach discussing this with my child.
Yeah.
Now, does the buck stop with the parents? Is it the primary role? This is only something parents only have to navigate on their own? Or what do you think the role for schools, community, the church, or any religious institutions and like our cultures, what do you think the play between the two usually should look like?
Okay. So in a healthy setup, it will be the entire world around that child.
True.
Is healthy enough to have the conversation. So that means the school, the church, the home. Because these are all influencers of the children.
True.
The parent is not the only influencer. Well, the parent is a very big influencer. Now, this is the reality is we live in the world in which the context, when you look at our education system, it doesn't give sex education comprehensively. So we know there's a bit of growth that is covered. Puberty conversation, which is covered around from grade 4. Unfortunately, it's also late for some children who start it way early.
Way earlier, yeah.
So they'll cover the basics of growth. We know that in high school, they cover a little bit, there's a little bit on the life skill where they talk about the ABCs of HIVs. It's more of a lot around HIV prevention. So there's the issue around abstinence, condom use, all those covered under the HIV prevention part, which is also a bit late. And since it's also not a tested subject, so it means sometimes teachers don't speak about it.
True.
So the reality is, if we leave the conversation just to school, our children miss a lot.
A lot, true.
And the reason why we are emphasizing on the parents is the parent is the only single constant primary educator of a child. This is it. Your child, when they start from kindergarten to high school, they'll continuously change teachers.
True.
So teachers will be different as they grow.
Yeah.
But you're the only one constant teacher since that child is born. 2 is also, there's the aspect of bringing values and your perspective to sexuality education, which no other educator can do.
True.
So school can do universal values, but they cannot not frame it around your own family values, which should be the anchor and the foundation of sexuality conversations. We miss out that part because if we are all different. So there's a liberal family whose view to the world is very liberal. There's a conservative family whose view to the world is conservative, and we need to bring all this in. So it's that bit, as a parent, if you miss it, then you miss that part of bringing your own family values into that particular conversation. It's also imagining for a parent, it's not just the benefit of educating your children, it's building a lifelong bond. Imagine if you can talk to your child about sex. What else can you talk about?
Exactly. Imagine if they know you're the safe space.
Yeah.
If they know that whatever I see, I don't believe, or whatever I'm told, I don't believe, or whatever is happening to me, I can come and discuss with you. Imagine that setup.
Imagine that setup. Like there will be nothing you can never talk about.
Exactly.
Like they know this is the home where it doesn't matter how tough it is, how wrong or right it is.
True.
This is that one space where we can hold this conversation. So it has impacts beyond just the sex conversation itself.
Absolutely. I agree 100. That's such a beautiful message to pass across. So as we're coming towards the end, as we're winding down, I'm going to jump into the questions, some of the questions we were asked. One of them was a mom asking, as a mom, because yes, I have my husband, he's present, or for some, maybe they're not, maybe they're also co-parenting separately, but I believe I also should play a role in my son and his upbringing and instilling life lessons and morals and teaching him about his body and how it functions. But how do I approach that? Because, again, I probably didn't even have these conversations myself. But more importantly, even if I did, they were facing me. There were conversations about me as a female, my development, the changes that are happening to me, my interaction with men, mostly around safety. Because again, there's a big gap there. And so we are forced to teach you protect yourself and how to look out for yourself. But then I have a son, and I want for women not to be afraid of him. And I want him to be able to live well and, within the grand context of living a full life in the real world. But I also want to teach him about the changes that are going to happen to him and the understanding of how he is developing on top of how he interacts with other men, other women as he's growing up. How do I go about that?
Okay, so first I'd say sex education is not gendered. We make it gendered because that's what our culture make it. So it means you can have a conversation with the opposite child without feeling like you are holding things around. And sex education is also not a masculinity or femininity mentorship thing. There's a difference in that we know a female, you cannot mentor masculinity. So what you do is when that bit, you can get somebody else to do it for you. If whether you're a single parent, you're in a relationship, you have to find out how to bring in the other partner on board to help you. And that can even be other men you've identified. Sometimes even your own partner cannot do it. So true. You are forced to even look outside. Even for those who have partners, you may find that it's they still look for other people outside who can do to help them. Help their children around the masculinity issue. Now, around the areas around sexuality itself is speak about anything. Like for me, I have boys. We speak about erection. We speak about wet dreams. We talk about it. And because we started early, it's not really awkward.
Right.
Now, I'm the person in the house who speaks and my partner doesn't.
Right, okay.
So even sometimes my children come, Mommy, there's this problem with me in my penis or something. So you literally have to then pull in the other partner to come. So you can have those conversations. But it has to start with you telling yourself, there's nothing wrong with me having this conversation. Now, the reality is also your child may want to learn from a person who is like them. Because then there's a shared experience. So you have to then, as a parent, have a balance in that even if I speak about them openly, I still need to find somebody else who can tell them, this is how it felt. For me, it was this weird. We were comparing ourselves like these boys when we were growing up. So you have to like as a parent then find a person who can help you in that conversation. So identify a person or just talk to your children and see who are they free with. Even ask. Like if there was something you wanted to ask about your body, which man would you go to? Sometimes you'll be surprised they even tell you it's the driver of their school.
They're comfortable.
They're comfortable with. So then just highlight that. Then just notify that person that my son says he's more comfortable to speak with you. Then I'd like you when he has such questions, he can come for you for guidance. But it doesn't stop you from speaking as a parent.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good advice. Another mom asked, when it comes, so she has her biggest fear is her daughters becoming women. It scares her to death. And I mean, you fully understand because the world is not the safest or the happiest place. You, as a woman, you come up, you develop with so many guards. Your wall is always up, trying to keep yourself safe. But her biggest challenge is navigating her fear in terms of them hitting puberty and having their own mind and thinking for themselves, becoming very, you start to separate from your mom. And the way, how best to help them navigate their sexual health safely. And she just doesn't feel prepared. She doesn't know where to start. So what would you advise a mom like that?
I'd advise first for her to just relax. It's her experience may be totally different from my children's experience. But when you raise children who are they know themselves, so it's around their own identity. It's also around esteem. Because if a child has a very high sense of esteem, it makes them make decisions more logically than emotionally.
True.
Because when you are in you have low self-esteem, you tend to want emotional attraction and dependence.
You're trying to attach to someone else.
Yes, and dependence. So by building your child's self-esteem, which parents can do in very numerous ways. This can be an entire episode on that.
Yeah, I know.
So
we're just giving tidbits here and there.
Yes. So self-esteem is empower your child in such a way that they appreciate who they are. They appreciate the beauty that they have. I know most of the time we tell our children beauty comes from within, but beauty is also out. So we need also to help our children identify,
acknowledge, help them see
what they like about
being.
themselves. Yes, because beauty is not just within. Beauty is also out. So they have to acknowledge. As I told you, my dad used to tell us, you have fat legs, mommy, but they're your legs.
There we go.
Walk with them proud.
We go. Can you ever be shy or embarrassed about them after that?
No,
right?
because they used to say they're your fat legs. Walk with them.
Walk with them. Own them.
Own them.
They're beautiful. Yeah.
So also find something that your child really, because during puberty, this is the reality. Self-esteem goes down for almost all the children. Because there's identity comparison.
Yeah.
So for almost all, they will go through a phase of low esteem.
True.
So it is our duties as parents to continuously uplift that self-esteem.
True.
To make our children believe in themselves as who they are, as who they appear to be, as what they can be. And then for her, the parent who is also empower your children into help them start being like critical thinkers. So don't just pass information. Allow them to reflect on scenarios that happens, on things that happen. Hear what they say. Because when you build them as critical thinkers, you're sure that when they'll go out, they'll be critical thinkers.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's actually a beautiful way to put it, because we overthink based off of our own narrative.
Yeah.
And again, as one of my previous guests put it beautifully, we encourage you to heal yourself first.
Yes.
So that you don't then push the traumas that you went through or you experienced onto your children. And it also doesn't cloud your mind when it comes to how you're talking to children. So just as we're winding down, I'd want us to address the aspect of, yes, you want to talk to your children, but you're approaching it from an adult point of view. Even as your child is asking you, for them, it's a very innocent question. They're coming from a very basic place. But us as parents, you're not ready. You're sitting there 1 minute, you're cooking a nice stew. Next thing, your baby comes and asks you, Mommy, what is this? With the most graphic, and your alarm bells and sirens kick off, and you panic and you just want to go and hide. And a lot of times we see parents shutting down the conversation and actually just saying, "Yoni bad manners," instead of actually encouraging the child to ask a question and giving them an answer at their level. So I want just to highlight that as an emphasis. What's your opinion on how we approach the conversation with our children, again, in a way to make it age appropriate?
Okay. So first, this is what we say. When a child asks a question, they're ready for an answer. So, but you have to understand what's their context. So when they come and ask you a question, find out what, like, try to pry what
ask them questions.
Ask them questions that allow you to understand the context, but don't ask, where did you hear that? Because then that shuts them down.
True.
So make sure that even as you ask the question, you're not using door closers, because door closers literally make the child feel guilty, feel ashamed. So maybe it's elaborate further. What word do you want me, like that question, so that they'll try to explain for you, this is how I meant it, and then answer them. After you've answered them, also ask, have I answered
the question?
Your question?
Yeah.
Because if you've not, they'll still say, no, I wanted it this way.
I was asking this.
I was asking this way.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's not about, and this is also the thing around sexuality conversation, is sometimes we focus so much on age, but we forget that sometimes your age is how you're matured. So I may be 8,
True.
but I'm matured like 12, because my exposure of friends is 12. So I'll give a good example of my son, who is 8, who's literally matured with his brother, who is 11 years old.
Okay.
So it means he's no longer 8.
What he knows, what he has been exposed to.
Because that is what he's exposed, that is his life around him.
Yeah.
So you'll find him asking me questions that even the other 11 years old can't ask.
Yeah.
But that is his age of how he's matured.
Yeah.
If you have a child who's been with adults, exposed with adults, they probably matured way early because of that exposure.
True.
So also don't limit yourself to the age, but also look at how the maturity of that child. Sometimes you also have a child who has maybe suffering from a condition. So they may be age maybe 14, but what they're asking you is like 7-year-old.
Yeah.
So you answer your child how the maturity is. Yeah. But always remember, when a child asks a question, they're ready for an answer.
Right.
Because they've already been exposed.
Okay.
That's why they're asking it.
Yeah.
So they're ready for that answer.
Okay.
But just answer it in that way. Ask so you get context. And then after you've answered, also ask that, have I answered you right?
Right.
Now, when you receive shock as a parent, is when you show shock, your children see the shock. So find your ways of hiding those shocks.
True. Feel it inside. Feel it inside. Scream inside.
I tell parents, this is the most interesting bit, is the excuse for the toilet always works.
Fantastic idea.
May I use the toilet?
Just
go and
give me
scream
1 minute.
if you want to scream in the toilet.
I'll be right back.
Come back exposed. Come back when you've already composed yourself.
Yeah.
And answer your child in a way that, because it's true, those shocks will never end.
Yeah.
But we are not saying don't be shocked, because you're also human. You'll be shocked. But just find what's your way of taking that shock away so that your child doesn't see it in your face.
True.
And the best excuse I give parents is use the washroom excuse.
Run off to the washroom for a few minutes.
Yes.
Deep breath, scream, cry, everything. Call for help.
And then come back.
Come back when you're composed and you're like, okay, Ati, what were you asking?
Yeah.
Then you pick and don't.
It even gives you time. You see, the beauty of the washroom is it even gives you time to call a friend.
Call for help. Call and ask, excuse me, this is what I've just been asked.
Yes.
What do I say?
Call that educator you have on one-on-one.
Exactly.
What does this mean? Call that expert.
Yeah.
Or sometimes, this is the most beautiful resource I have.
Yeah.
Go and then come back on your child will not know that you're doing all those in your washroom break.
Yeah, at all. Yeah. I love it. I feel like this conversation, we're just starting to scratch the surface. And so I'm pretty sure I'm going to have you back on. Yeah. But in the meantime, how can we find you? If in case anybody wants to be able to reach out to you, how can we find you?
So Akinyi Ochieng on social media. I'm called Teen Talk Table.
Okay.
Teen for teens. Talk. So Teen Talk Table, both on Facebook, on Instagram.
Okay.
And the number they can find me is on 0758 351 012.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm sure you'll find all that information in the description as well. I'll put out all your handles and your phone number as well. I know we're going to continue this conversation. I'm very, very clear already in my mind that there'll be tons of questions. There'll be lots of comments that we should address. Yeah. So I do encourage that you reach out and leave a comment, ask a question. If you're listening in, please rate this episode so that we can also know to bring a part 2, a part 3. I need to be able to convince Emily to keep coming back. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for at least starting to peel back the layers of this conversation, because it's too deep for us to pretend we've covered everything. But at least we're starting at a good point, a good starting point. Let's stop sweeping it under the carpet and hiding from the realities.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for tuning in this week. I look forward to seeing you again next week for the next episode. Again, for the listeners, if at all you feel inclined to, please rate the podcast, rate the episodes. And for those of you on YouTube, remember, subscribe, like, comment, share. Those are the things we say.
Yeah. For the awesome content.
Yes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again next week.